Welcome to Nashville Forward. I'm Sami Kincaid, host of Nashville Forward, joined today by CEO of the Nashville Predators, Todd Henry. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And before we get going, can you just tell me a little bit about who is Sean Henry?
Sure, I'm kind of boring. Um, Pretty passionate sports fan, just like you. Love everything that we do. Really proud. Married the same woman 32 years, 4 kids, who all kind of like each other, which I'm more proud of that than anything. I was asked once, "What's your biggest fear?" And it's like maybe when my kids are adults, they don't like each other. I'm proud to say they
They all
do.
like each other.
Yeah, it's fun. So pretty simple guy in that regard. But I love sports, love music, love this community. Well, I'm from New York, so by the grace of God, I'm a Yankee fan and a Giants fan. But my wife is a Lions fan, which makes me a suffering Lions fan. But just regular life. Grew up there, youngest of six. Played everything with the seasons, and was really fortunate. Out of college, was offered a job at the company I worked for, a food and beverage company. To move to Detroit, they built a trainee program around me, which was pretty neat. I remember my dad said, "Look, you can't cook hot dogs the rest of your life." And it turns out he was wrong. That's what I've been doing for the past 35 years. It's been wonderful. Moved all over the country with my wife. Met her in Detroit. She worked for the Pistons. Detroit, St. Louis, Tampa. Commuted to DC for a little while, and then 13 years ago, I got the best call I've ever gotten in my life. And that was to come here.
That's pretty incredible. And so, whenever you did get that call, kind of walk me through that conversation. What were some of those conversations? And I mean, in 2015, that was just before a couple of really good years for the Nashville Predators.
Yeah, so I actually came here in 2010
Okay.
as the president. Got promoted in 2015 as the CEO. But we were going through in Tampa in '08. We sold the team. We being the Detroit Pistons owned the Lightning. So our owner he just passed away. So we're selling everything for his wife, our minor league teams, our arenas, and our amphitheaters, both major league teams. And at the same time, the Preds were going through some transition. The team almost left. This wonderful group of guys bought the team, day one season ticket holders, Tom Seager and Herb Fritch and Thompsons, and really saved the team, to keep it here in Nashville. I remember watching it and think, wow, what a great city. The fans rallied around it. But we sold it to a group of guys that struggled as well. We ended up taking the team back, we being the Pistons, and then resold it to the current owner, Jeff Vinnick. So I was consulting for the Lightning and a few other teams. And I remember I got a phone call from someone that said, hey, the Preds want to talk to you. Go up there and run the team. I said, no, I'm fine. I'm happy where I am. And I hung up the phone and I was there with 3 or 4 of my friends. We're on vacation and my wife. And I told her about it and they all stared at me like, wait, what? So I said it again. And they're like, well, hang on a minute. And they literally had an intervention. They said, you got to call them back right now. You've always talked about the team. You've always talked about the fans and the city and the pulse around it. Plus, you're miserable not working directly for a team, which I didn't even realize I was.
Yeah.
Best thing ever happened to me was making that phone call back, calling Tom Seager and back. And I got here maybe 4 weeks after the flood happened in 2010. And that made me fall in love with the city even more so before I even had the job. The ironic thing is that's the only job interview I've ever had in my entire life. When I was 14 years old, with a pencil, I wrote out an application for the job that I worked all through college and, my first 10 years out of college. And I didn't even know what to do in an interview. I really didn't. So I was leaving that first day and I'll never forget, I said, Tom and Chris Seagren, this is awesome. When should I start? I said, well, we're interviewing like a dozen people. And I was crushed. I was like, what are you talking about? But I was fortunate enough to get offered the job and it's been great.
They always say though, whenever you're leaving an interview to ask for the job, and you basically told them, "I'm getting the job."
I didn't even think like there was someone else, the most arrogant guy in the world for some reason. So
That's funny, and we'll get to 2010 and the flood, and I feel like that's when Nashville really saw a lot of growth. But let's kind of go back, and that's really interesting that they were season ticket holders since day one, and 1998 was a big year for Nashville in general. You
absolutely.
had the Preds come, you have the Titans coming to town. How did that kind of coincide with just, even though you weren't here, you've probably had conversations with people. How did those kind of coincide with each other?
Yeah, so at the time I was working for basically a food and beverage company that used to manage some portions of this industry that we're in. We used to invest in arenas and stadiums. And I came up a few years earlier and met with Mayor Bredesen for us to invest in what was going to become the arena. And I was really blown away on what he was taking on. I mean, a lot of people weren't behind it, thought there was something, it was crazy. But his philosophy is so simple. He takes civic furniture and put it around town, and good things are built around it. But I remember standing on Broadway with him, staring at a hole in the ground, thinking he's crazy. And Broadway wasn't safe. Two-thirds of the buildings were empty. The fewer that were there are on life support, all the wrong kind of businesses. And at the same time, we were looking at Tampa to invest in that building. And it was almost the same thing. It was in a kind of a burned out, real bad area on the water. And we didn't invest in either one of them. We invested in Jacksonville Jaguars and St. Louis Rams, which brought me to St. Louis. And the ironic thing is I've spent the past 25 of my years in one of those two places. But once it started getting built, once they were awarded the team a year after the building was up and running, and David Poyle decided to come here as the GM, that's when you realized this franchise has a chance to become a really, really special one because you're hiring one of the best GMs in all sports. And, then he did the crazy thing. Every expansion team hires an angry old coach. Terry Crisp with Tampa Bay Lightning. You go in there, the idea is through their experience and sheer passion and will, they'll squeeze an extra 2 wins out of the team. And he hired some inexperienced minor league coach in Barry Trotz, which again, Phil Bredesen was right. Craig Leopold was right for hiring David Poyle, and David couldn't have been more right than hiring Barry, who defined what we were, and ironically now is back as our GM, which is great.
Yeah. And whenever you talk about Barry Trotz and just the Preds coming here, I feel like from the get-go, they really embrace Nashville, the community. What were some of those strategies that you have heard them talk about that they implemented then that you still implement now?
The funny thing is I don't think it was a strategy. It was just who they both were. And that's what makes it even better. I always say, the best strategy is born out of, who you are and what you are when it's good. And Barry's the very, very best. I mean, that guy gives and he gives and he gives, not to sell tickets, not to impress a player or a business. That's what you should do. And he also realized, a lot of the really great athletes and coaches have in all sports, that we're all in a unique position. Fans have such passion for our logo. If we don't leverage that, to touch a child or raise some money for a good cause, what are we doing? I mean, you win 50 Stanley Cups in a row, and it wouldn't matter compared to what you could do to help change a kid's life. Now, ideally, let's do both.
Yeah.
But that's just who Barry is, and that's who David was. So it was really born out of that. And then back then, the expansion rules weren't as they are now. Then you're taking, guys that probably were cast-offs in their own organization. You look at the job they did, the types of players they brought in. I mean, it's absolutely incredible, the team that was built. But they're all really good guys, too, because at that point, if you're taking a guy that maybe has been in the league for 15 games or on the other end, towards the end of his career, you might as well pick guys that are good people, too. So it was kind of by design-ish to have a good locker room, to set a tone that we would inherit, 5 years at a time, pass it on, pass it on, pass it on. So it was really who they were, married up with the necessity of getting good guys to make that room a little bit better. And all of a sudden, you look at who we are, and we do more in the community than any other team in sports. And that's something we're so proud of. And it's not even about money. I mean, it's great to give away $4 million a year or whatever it is right now. But better than that, all of our players have a program. All of our players aren't there for the camera. They're there for something they believe in. And that's where we're a little bit unique. Rebecca Ward, or Rebecca King, she's only been married 10 years now. Rebecca King will interview our new players and say, what are you into? What's your passion? And whatever they say, she says, okay, let's build a program for that group or this group. And many times we're bringing in new groups. And sometimes the guys are 18 years old and they were like, I don't know. So we'll lay out for them, 4 or 5, 6, 7 different things. But we only engage them with things that they care about. I think where a lot of teams make a mistake is they'll pick 5 causes and just put it right on a guy who, if it doesn't click with them, they're showing up. Sure, it's great. We want guys that just live it and then come back to us and say, wait, we need to do more. And especially now, some of those young guys then are now married and building families right here. It is a culture that was intentional by accident.
Yeah, no, that's really impressive to hear how it's built because players like Yossi, for example, he was very young whenever he first got here, now with the family, and just all the foundations that each of the players have. It's really impressive how they give back to the community.
It is, and there's a good example where I was talking about those 5-year segments that kind of evolved into new things. When you hear Roman talk about his passions, Best Buddies is something that he really, really cares about. I mean, so many other causes as well, but Best Buddies was almost given to him by Shea Weber, who was the captain when he got here, and who's his, top D pairing for a little while. And as he always says, Shea taught me how to be a pro. Well, he just passed Shea in goals for for the Preds, over 800 games played, whatever it is. And then when you talk to Shea about, why Best Buddies? He said, well, I met Barry Trotz, who started Best Buddies in the state of Tennessee, which, I mean, you think about that. No head coach, no GM can you point to in any sport and say, he started X.
Right.
That's as big as it is. But, for Shea and Pekka, that became really important, for them as pediatric cancer did too. So for Roman, it was just, all right, well, Shea's doing that. I'll go with him. Then he fell in love with the cause and he's made it even bigger. So it's
Yeah.
incredible.
No, it's great that you find something that they're passionate
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
But something else that you do to give back to the community, the Ford Ice Centers.
Mhm.
Can you talk to me a little bit about what those Ford Ice Centers are?
Yeah. Again, I always go back to good leaders and great cities have good leaders. Great states have good leaders. And we've been blessed as a city and a state to really have some incredible ones before I got here and then living through them now. But Carl Dean was mayor, obviously very, very similar to a Mayor Bredesen, who was governor at the time when we are having this conversation. And he knew we wanted to build rinks. And we wanted, the biggest mistake this team ever made, I think, was in 97, not building a rink. And then one in 99 and 2006 and, on down the line. The Dallas Stars did a really good job when they relocated from Minnesota to Dallas. They built, I think, 2 rinks pretty quickly and then 4 rinks within 10, 15 years. So we went to Carl. We were redoing our lease, trying to take a little bit more control of our destiny, invest more in the building from a private standpoint. So we need to build a rink. He said, absolutely, we do. And this is what I love about Carl. He's quiet, but he's sneaky quiet. He said, we were looking at Bellevue Mall. And he said, yeah, we definitely should build it in a mall that's not active anymore. I said, yep, yep. So we're going to meet there on Wednesday. And I drove out there with another guy. And I'm getting mad because they're not there. And if I'm 5 minutes early, I'm late. Like I'm everywhere pretty promptly. And so I called Rich Riebling, who's director of finance, Greg Highnote, who's the deputy mayor. And I got put the voicemail with one of them. The other one called me laughing. He said, where are you? I said, I'm where I'm supposed to be. I'm right outside Sears. And he said, no, you're not. I said, I am. I'm the only car in the parking lot. He said, you're in the wrong mall. I said, what are you talking about? I'm in Bellevue Mall. He said, we're not building in Bellevue. We're building in Antioch. And at the time, Antioch, unfortunately, was, probably 10, 15 years into just such a steep decline. And so I drove over there. I've never spent any time over there at all. And pretty good friends with the gentleman who owns the Chevy dealership over there. So I called him on my way. I said, what am I getting into? And he laughed because he knew. And he said, it's a great place. You build the rink there and great things will happen around it. But I thought, he's insane because all I've heard is really negative things about it. And, the mall's vacant. And, when there's no traffic, that's when, you get security issues. And we stood there and they sold it on me like this. If we do it here, and Carl took all my arrogance and threw it back on me. He said, you could do this, 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 and this. If you do that in Antioch, you're going to change what Antioch looks like. And if you do that, you're going to have no problem building the second one or the third one or the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh one. And I said, all right, what am I going to do? We got to do it now. And of all the things I've been part of in my entire career, and I've just been so fortunate with so many high sides, there'll be nothing better than what we've done with Antioch because the whole area is changing. The city now bought the guts of the mall. You have Nashville State out there. Bridgestone's out there for a little while. It's being repurposed right now. You have building going out there. Nashville SC went out there. You have the new mall. I don't even know what it's called. I'm not a shopper, but activity's happening. But even bigger than that, we knew we wanted to change the face of hockey. We wanted to get more girls playing, and then we wanted to get a lot more kids playing that didn't look like my sons. And one of the biggest things that we did by accident was we broke down a geographical boundary. Because normally, you build the rinks in certain types of suburbs, and then you're going to get certain kids playing. And also, my boys learned to play in Tampa, and my girls learned to play here. The difference between who was on their teams was night and day. I mean, truly, it was really good to start seeing more of Nashville, the full spectrum of who people are starting to play hockey. And since then, we've grown it so much so we built the one in Bellevue, finally, in Bellevue Mall, just opened up the one in Montgomery County, in conversations right now with 2 other suburbs. But it really takes a good political leader to push it through, to believe in what are we going to do for kids. And Vince Gill has a great quote, give a kid a choice, a good choice, and he or she will always take it, without exception. They will never break your heart. If you don't give a kid a choice, well, then they'll all default to whatever's at hand. And that's what our rinks are, for kids. We have, I don't even know, 500 kids playing absolutely for free. We give them the equipment. We outfit them. We teach them to skate through Scott Hamilton. I mean, who better to teach you to skate than one of the greatest ever? And then you learn to play with equipment that we provide to you. We're trying to break down those boundaries. It's an expensive sport to play, especially in the South, where outside of last week, you just can't go outside and play. So we're really, really proud of what's going on and what's been created. And, everyone said, oh, you're doing that because they're fan factories. I'm like, well, I guess so. But that 7-year-old that's learning to play today, I can't wait to get his money in 30 years. I mean,
Right.
in a way it is, you make the family fall in love with it. But hockey has a way of consuming your life when you're playing youth hockey too. But what Danny Butler built in both Ford Ice Centers and our programs were almost smaller schedules. So we want the kid to play baseball or volleyball or football or lacrosse and hockey. We have a pretty big disdain for any coach that tries to force a kid into one sport. There's not one player on our team, not one, that only played hockey. And you think
Mhm.
about that for a minute. There's
Yeah.
not too many professional athletes that only play one sport. And
Right.
I'd almost dare someone to name one. And there was that one famous football player in California who got washed out as a pro. He only played football. But great athletes play everything.
Mhm.
One out of passion, two out of cross training, understanding it, and we're really proud of it.
Yeah, before we started recording this, we were talking about how your kids played at the rival of
Hmm.
my high school that I went to. And it's really, I mean, I feel like every single team that was playing for the championship, it was always from certain neighborhoods. And so it is great to see things expand. And kind of going back to 2010, I feel like that's when you really started to see things expand, and places like Antioch didn't look like Antioch anymore.
No,
And you just saw so much growth.
you did. And, Tom Seagren, who was our chairman in 2010 that hired me, what I loved about Tom, and I remember Barry Trotz said it to me when he was the coach. Here he is, a day one season ticket holder, chose to move to Nashville, built his business here, raised his kids here, just like Herb Fritz. They both relocated here because they loved Nashville and did fairly well in business, but they loved the sport. They knew the city was better with the team here. So they bought it. They didn't want to be sports owners. They always say, like, we did it to save it. We did it for the city. We did it for the love of the game. But the one thing about Tom was, let's remove no from our vocabulary. Because before he took over, it was, well, we'll draft players really well. We'll train them really well. We'll make them all stars. Before they get free agency, we'll trade them. And that happened time and time and time again. It broke David Boyle's heart, but it was never really supported from the business side of our organization, where Tom said, times change. We're here now not to compete with the original six or the biggest of all. We're here to beat them in everything, you know,
Yeah.
in our boardrooms, right on to the locker room. And it's now where we need to set, 10-year plans and start looking 30 years down the road, where before that we were looking months down the road. Every successful business looks, so far down the road. And that's really when it started. Some really good things happening. We missed the playoffs last year. It was the first time in 10-ish years. We had the second longest streak that was in there. If we won two more games in 2017, the whole conversation's different.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really fun to see so many different people loving and playing our game and filling our stands up now. Working closely with TSU to launch the first Division One women and men's hockey program at HBCU. I got it right. I always struggle with initials and acronyms; they're hard to spell. Um, and Austin P just launched, their club program will start playing. Those are pretty cool, special things. And I always say, if we're successful, not if, when we're successful at TSU, that'll be more transformative for our game than anything since probably the mid '90s, when the women's programs really started launching. You see where it is right now, and as a country, we compete at the highest levels. And you see, so many young ladies looking at it saying, wow, there's a future for me now. I
Yeah.
can play. And I remember when my youngest daughter stopped playing, she was in seventh grade, maybe eighth grade. And we hosted at the time the women's league's all-star game. And she was standing with me. It was a doubleheader game. And she was looking at her future. And she
Mhm.
said, Dad, I want to play again. And it was awesome because, sometimes representation matters. If people don't see people that look like them, why continue to do it? So, yeah, we're proud of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of going back to the Ford Ice Center, and you're talking about those 7 year olds
Yeah.
and getting their money in 30 years. But I do feel like there is some validity to that, because as somebody that grew up in Nashville, I remember having season tickets since day one. And people just talked about how now, I mean, I feel like everyone kind of grabbed onto the Preds early on since day one, but
Yeah.
especially as my generation became adults. Did you see? I just felt like you really saw a huge increase in fans and just the level of fandom. I don't know the best way to describe
No, it's
it.
the passion. I mean,
Yeah.
we have the most passionate fan base in sports, period. And I say that, and I love saying, one, it's true. Two, I love that the Packer fans get mad when I say it. I really love that the quote unquote traditional teams really get mad because we embrace being non traditional. There used to be a
Yeah.
knock, like, oh, it's a non traditional team. Thank goodness. We're non traditional and we're fun and we're good. And that combination has created that passion. And, the worst thing that happened to this team was almost moving in '07, '08, whatever year it was. The best thing was a whole new generation of fans said, well, it's a smart investment to keep them here. I'm going to buy some tickets. Never been to a game before. But out of that became this like layer of ownership where, we always say our fans own who and what we are. We just rebranded and reevaluated and evolved our whole season ticket program based around loyal. It's Nashville Loyal because we realize that's who they are. Our fans built this program with us, but it's so different. It's so unique. I love going to league meetings and, I'm on our president's council, which is, I don't know, a handful of us. And I love it because they get mad. When we lost to Pittsburgh in the playoffs in 27 and Stanley Cup in 2017, we always have a meeting maybe 3 weeks later. It's Board of Governors meeting. We have 4 a year. So it's right before the draft, right after the Stanley Cup. And if you're not the team that wins the Stanley Cup, you hate the first 10 minutes of that meeting because, our league executives, Gary Bettman, our commissioner, does what he should do. And he congratulates first the losing team for a great season. And then, really congratulates, the winning team, the executives, the owner, whoever's there. And if you're not that one getting congratulated, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like watching someone else go to the prom. And on this one, it was so weird. Pittsburgh just won their third Stanley Cup in whatever it was, 8 years, 10 years. They were in 4 in that span. And he did. Of course, he congratulated him. What a great thing they did. Mario Lemieux saved that team, and it was good to see him win if you weren't us.
Yeah.
And he went on and on about it. And then spent the next 20 minutes talking about Nashville and what we did for the Stanley Cup. And we changed how it was celebrated. Before that, you didn't see people in the streets watching. Right. And, we changed rules and policies with our own league, really during the All-Star game the year before. And it used to be you couldn't have watch parties outside the venue. And we turned it into just the biggest party in town. It was like a Florida football game, the world's biggest cocktail party. And there were probably 25,000 people at game, I don't know, 3, I guess was our first home game that never even thought about the Preds. But they were there for a huge party. It was during a CMA Fest. And they're all pretty rabid fans today. And again, we win 2 more games. We should have won game 1. We should have won game 6. I'm not crying about any calls that were made or not made. I've never had before in my life, and I'm still not. But if I ever was going to, it would be game 1 and game 6. But it really would have been a little bit bigger, saying we were in the playoffs 10 straight years or 9 straight years. But, the goal is to put ourselves in a position to compete at the highest level year in and year out. Last year, I don't want to say a reset, but it was somewhat of a reset. We traded away some of our favorite players. It was hard to do. But if we didn't stockpile a few draft picks, make some room for the younger players that had so much fun at the end of the season last year, and you see what they're doing this year, we'd never take that step forward. And what we said with this year is, this is going to be a team that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. There's going to be a lot of up and downs. When you're giving prominent roles to young players, they're going to be really exciting and really exciting, good and bad. For the most part, it's been really positive. But when you see power plays and penalty kills featuring young players, it's exciting. And, we have the best team in the AHL, right now. So that bodes well for the future too. Barry always talks about creating serial winners. So when your AHL team or, our minor league top affiliate is winning and they're getting put in deep playoff races like they were last year, went to the semifinals, I think. Yeah, semifinals. I always get those finals confused. But you're teaching guys what it's like to go through the grind of those long playoff runs. And eventually they'll come up here and, that's going to pay dividends down the road.
Absolutely. And just a second ago, you mentioned the All-Star game.
Yeah.
That I'm sure does a ton for the city, just how much business that's bringing to all of the businesses around that are benefiting from that many people coming to town. Is there a chance that the All-Star game gets hosted here again?
What I love about our city is I'm not exaggerating. We announced the All-Star game, whatever, I don't know, summer of 2015 or 2014 for January of 2016. We worked with the league for years to get it. They wanted to give it to us. What they said is, look, you need a convention center that can house certain things. You need a certain type of a hotel. Convention center was built. The Omni was built. And they said, all right, let's do it. And they were excited about it. I mean, everyone says, every fan thinks the league hates their city and their team. It doesn't matter what league and what city. Everyone believes it. our fans were vocal about that, which I laugh because this administration, our commissioner, Gary Bettman, longest serving commissioner in sports history, loves Nashville. We were his first expansion team. Like, I don't care who you are. He would never say who's his favorite team, but there's a special place in his heart for Nashville. So much so that he didn't let the team move in 07, 08. You know, he really helped find those local guys and push it forward. So when he gave us the All-Star game, he was as excited as we were to showcase what the city was to the globe. For us, it was to show the hockey world, to show guys that are considering maybe coming here as a free agent, how special it was. And ironically, you know, that All-Star game, you know, you had probably four guys that were All-Stars that now play for us or played for us since then. I'm not saying that's the reason, but when they walked down that red carpet on the streets from a band that had 40,000 people in front of it and the stars that played in that band for free. I mean, it was like a whole swing of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Country Music Hall of Fame. Guys wouldn't come into the building. That's the only thing we failed at. Our players didn't want to leave the party out there, and that party was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So that was our launching pad, I think, anyway. We knew what we had. But all of a sudden, I was telling the rest of the world that there's kind of a new team in town, and we're going to redefine what we do. And that, fortunately, we earned our way to Stanley Cup the next year, the President's Trophy the next year. And I love the fact that probably 90 different teams from leagues around the country or around our industry has spent at least 2 weeks with our organization to say, well, what do you do and how do you do it? And those will answer. The why, we can't answer. I just stare at the people and say, oh, your boss made you come. Because if you're asking why we think our fans are important, you're probably never going to get it.
Yeah.
And obviously, those are normally from the larger cities who don't think their fans are as important as we do.
Yeah.
And that's why our experience is more fun.
Yeah, and you mentioned larger cities. Nashville, is one of those large cities now, which is crazy to think what it was like in 2010 versus now. But it does still have that small town feel. And just going to games, I constantly see people I knew growing up or people that I knew growing up working there.
Mm-hmm.
How many local employees does the Preds have?
Oh, most. You know, what I love about who we are, we have about 400 employees now. When I got here, we had 70 or 80. Someone said, you shouldn't brag about that. That just means, you know, you're doing less with more. I said, no, because we're operating now in 5 different buildings. You know, we're one of the busiest venues in the world. It's a great thing, actually. But of those employees, most are from here. But about half of our employees, maybe a little bit more now, were interns with us at some point. You know, maybe they came back to us 5 years after they graduated. Some graduated on Saturday, started on Monday. I used to teach a class in Belmont, and a young lady applied for a job while I was, you know, teaching that very first class. And I love telling that story because once you introduce who we are and what we are to the community, people do want to come work for us. It's a fun environment. You know, we're proud of some of the accolades we get for being one of the best workplaces in the world, not just in Nashville. And there's nothing better than when someone works with us and they get promoted. Maybe they leave and go to another team, get promoted a few times. And you look around the sports globe right now, and probably half of the teams around have someone on their executive team that used to work for us. And to me, that's a pretty cool thing. But like you said, the sheer volume of kids that I saw as young kids playing hockey with my own kids who are now working for us, it's pretty cool. I mean, just the other night, my son graduated high school younger son in 2018, so college in 2022. And, you know, COVID messed with everyone's tenure. A kid that he played hockey with came up to me during the game. I haven't seen him in probably 5 years and hugged me, which he's not a very huggy guy. And I'm definitely not a huggy guy. Like, I hate hugs. The rule is you win the Stanley Cup, you can hug.
So when I say bye, I give you a
hug. We'll high five, we'll knuckle. But he hugged me. I was like, what are you doing? He goes, I start Monday. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. In my head, he's still in junior high school.
Yeah.
But no, it really is fun when you see, you know, young men and women that are from Nashville that maybe grew up fans. I mean, Chase Lutz, who oversees our marketing department, brought in a picture of himself as a 3-year-old entering the goal program. That's our, you know, get out and learn program. And you look at that and you think, how cool is that? And there's, you know, 4 or 5 people that, you know, when we did our season ticket launch last year, it was basically, you know, remember when type of thing, building to the 25th anniversary. And we have 4 or 5 employees that had those baby pictures in jerseys. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, no, that's really special to be able to have that many employees have something like that.
Right.
But talking about just having those people come back, they also know where the program has been
Right.
and how much it's grown. Where do you see the growth of the Nashville Predators going, though?
Well, ideally, soon behind your shelf, instead of those awards, you have miniature Stanley Cups back there, because that it is all about winning,
Yeah.
and we love all of our other businesses, but we always say if what drives who and what we are filling the building every single night, whether it be for a Preds game or Globetrotters or whatever. But that is the most essential thing that we can do for the city, but for us, because the bigger that is, the better it is, the more exposure it is, the cooler it is. And then also the hockey operations taps into that in how we draft, what players we can recruit, because there are players that want to be here because of what Nashville's become, which we're a little arrogant in that. Like it was built around our building. Truly. I was in Clarksville last night speaking to Leadership Tennessee, talking about F&M Bank Arena. That was built because of Bridgestone Arena. It was built because they want that to do for downtown Clarksville what our building did for Nashville. And it's already starting. It's pretty neat. So it's the future. Obviously, has a lot of Stanley Cups because once you win one, it's a weird thing. You get really selfish and you want another one. And I was fortunate to win one in '04, and never again. You're like, my gosh, you thrive. I was talking to Barry, who they won in 2018. Yeah, right after us. Like I said, we need one because let's face it, how great will the party be in June on Broadway during CMA Festival? Like it'd just be incredible. But then, from a business standpoint, we're transforming the building. We signed a 30-year lease extension on the building's 22nd anniversary. That's normally when buildings start to deteriorate because people don't take care of them. They don't see the future. Maybe you tear it down to build a new one. For us, if someone came to us and said, here's $1.5 billion to build the greatest arena ever built, but it just can't be at 501 Broadway, we'd say no thanks, because that's where we want to be. We also believe that we can make that building the most modern building in America year in and year out for the next 50 years. I mean, Madison Square Garden is almost 60 years old. They've always invested in it. They've always taken care of it, transformed the building about 10 years ago, a 5-year renovation plan. And it's one of the most modern buildings that's out there. I hate the Red Sox and the Cubs, but I'm so mad the Yankees tore their building down and didn't invest in it, like
Yeah.
Fenway and Wrigley.
Yeah.
And, for me, we go to Coney Island every time I go home, just so I can tell my kids, and now I have a granddaughter, can't wait to take her. So, that's where my grandparents met. My grandfather was an Italian immigrant, as my grandmother was, and they literally met there. To me, that's what makes that place special. It's not fun. They're better amusement parks. They're better places to go, but I'll always go there. I want my granddaughter to talk about, her first 3 Stanley Cups in our building to her grandson, and that's going to be neat. So the future is really bright. Our building's going to not look like it does right now, but all the important parts of our building will get a lot better.
How do you build? Because as there's more fans and your granddaughter gets older and she has a family and bringing her kids, the fans, the number, it's going to grow. How do you put more seats in a building and you kind of overcome that?
Yeah, there's some proper mix of how big a building should be. And if you're, on an incredible tear, you want 100,000 seats. If your team's struggling, you want 4,000 seats. We have one of the smaller buildings in the league. I think we're the 5th-ish smallest, give or take. And I think if we could add about 1,000 seats in a fairly unique fashion, we're going to be able to continue to do what we do. We have one of the lowest prices in the NHL to get in, and that's something we're proud of. And fans will always tell me, "Oh my gosh, it's so expensive." I wish it was free. I really do. I wish you could charge $1 for every ticket. But if we want to compete at the highest levels and we want to match, the salaries of the Rangers and the Maple Leafs and whomever, we have to sell out. We have to do certain things. What we've done is we built a lot of premium product to carry the burden of most of that revenue growth. But if we can build of those 1,000 seats about 400, which will allow us to preserve a really low entry level to make sure those fans can come in, whether it be family packs or it's college night packs. You want to make sure those 15 to 20-year-olds can get in. I'm a huge sports fan. The first New York Ranger game I saw in Hartford when I was 16 years old. We couldn't afford to go to a game. There was no program to step into it. I want to make sure that, the 16-year-old Sean Henry can come to Bridgestone Arena. And it's actually easier to do than some people think. The building was value engineered to levels that most weren't. So above our upper bowl was supposed to be a press box. It was never built. So actually, we'll go up in the building, actually build a press box, which will free up about 200 seats for where the press box is now. But then also add in almost like a gondola around for some type of really cool standing room only area, maybe a club up there. We're going to expand right out onto Broadway. Picture the upper deck, having the world's largest rooftop bar, for their amenities in and out. We're going to be able to build curb to curb from 5th to 6th to Broadway to Demumbrian, build into our rehearsal hall to really expand what's going on, where we're going. And again, just provide a little bit more offerings. When the building was built, it was built introvertedly to keep Broadway out. That's how bad Broadway was. Remember, the old convention center's back door was on Broadway, which is crazy. Now it's time to rip the walls out. And the goal is to not know where Demumbrian starts and ends or Broadway starts and ends. So on an event day, our concourses go right out to the curb line. On non-event days, those streets kind of come right into the concourse. And it's going to be really cool. It's going to be a fun place to come for a concert, family event, obviously a hockey game, but it's also going to become a fun place to come if you want to experience, Broadway, but maybe not as intense as some of the places, but they're still there.
Yeah.
So
No, that's really cool to hear how it was started and
yeah,
how much space there still is to grow
there's a
within
lot.
the building. And a couple of things you said. First, though, I want to touch on. I've heard there's bars and restaurants coming soon, and you kind of just hinted at that. Can you talk about any of those developments yet?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're doing some fine tuning of engineering. We've done early engineering drawings. First, we did a case study of our buildings at the time was 22 years old. What do we need to invest? What do we need to do to just take this current building, make sure in 30 years it's functioning the right way, from vertical transportation to the roof line to superstructure. How many times we got to replace the scoreboard and whatever it may be. So that's a pretty simple exercise. We're updating that right now. And then we're also asked some people that don't know Nashville at all, don't know who we are and what we are at all, to look at some of the things that we thought about with a blind eye. Like, is it feasible? Should we do it? Can we do it? If you own this, what would you do? With one major, major caveat: we're going to make the arena better for our fans. Nothing as at the risk of the game experience. It's to make the game experience better, where a few teams have added on built developments, and it almost became at the risk of the experience. And I'm not going to bring up a baseball stadium that's not that far away because I love going there, but they built a great development around the stadium. But they got greedy and they said, well, if we could make this space a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, by making it bigger, it infringed on the actual stadium itself, the concourse widths, the ingress and the egress. And I remember talking to a good friend that's there. He said, well, we're probably going to fill the building 75% of the time.
Hmm.
So it's okay that the concourse is narrow. When it's hard to get in, it's hard to get out. Well, they've sold out almost every game since it's been open. And I think if they had a do-over, it would have been, the development should have suffered at the risk of a great venue, not the other way around. For us, we have a great venue. The venue is going to be better. Oh, and by the way, we'll also have these other things. And that's really, really important. But yeah, no, there'll be a lot of mixed retail that's in there. We just opened up BetMGM Sports Lounge. It's a 7-day-a-week, 12-hour-a-day restaurant that is so cool. Drive for Fifth Avenue. And anything we're doing now, we're making sure it can fit into the future of what the building is. I mean, one of the drawings that we have, one of the studies that I was taking the main entrance, the main plaza that's on Broadway and Fifth, and moving it in between Broadway and Demumbrian on Fifth, almost like where the team store is, because now you have so much more ingress and egress coming from the south side of the building. When the building was built, nothing happened south of the building, in Sobro, where now it's almost an equal level. So you want to almost transform it. So then you could take the personalities of the South Plaza and the main plaza and activate them a little differently. So there's just a lot of very cool things. I'm more excited about that than most things that I've been a part of.
And it's crazy the transformation of downtown, especially that area. And you've mentioned it a couple of times, but I remember growing up, I used to not be able to walk on the south side of the building by myself.
Right.
I had to have my dad walk with me,
Hmm.
and now it's completely different. And going back to 2010, your first year here in Nashville, when did you really start to see that transformation? Because I'm sure you saw a lot of businesses coming in, and kind of what was going through your mind of, do we embrace all of those new businesses coming in, or how did you kind of mentally go through all of that?
So I'm a building geek, like I just am. And, a lot of my career, my former company was in renovating, investing, building, designing arenas, stadiums, amphitheaters, minor league ballparks. And I just love it. I love looking at how a building and a city are evolving, and how do you tap into that? An emerging city like ours, I was in Tampa, a growth city as well. But I was also in some cities that weren't growth cities, but you still need to make the experience different and better. For me, I just looked at it and said, look at all the business coming. I mean, you sit with the Chamber of Commerce for an hour, and if you don't get excited, if you do what I do for a living, just retire, you quit, go find a new job, because our job gets easier with bigger population. It doesn't change what we are, but I always laugh. My friends in New York teams, their business plan's genius. They have 15 million people within 5 miles of their building. Like they can fall down and sell out. Like
Yeah.
they fall down, but what they miss, some of them, not all of them, is building the true culture and the fandom and the core of igniting those 15 million people. Us, you have to go to a pretty big circle to get 15 million people, like, oh, I don't know, 600 miles. So obviously that's not there for us. But we do want to make sure that, a city moves into our city every year, or a town moves into our city every year. During COVID, those people moving here, they couldn't come to our games because we had no people coming. Right before COVID, right after COVID, we were selling out every game. So there have been people that have been moving the city for 3, 4, 5, 6 years that might not have been to a game. They've heard about it. So it's our job to make sure that, we're tapping into who they are, telling their stories from their business growth. But every day, I mean, our leader of sponsorship sales, Jack Burke and Deanna Witter, our CRO, I think they get tired of my emails because it's just copying and pasting from the Business Journal or this story. And, the largest Dairy Queen franchisee just moved to Franklin. He bought Miley Cyrus's old house, and their offices are in Brentwood. You see that. And it's not a huge job migration. I think it's 500 jobs. But most cities, if you have that many jobs coming in, the whole city knows about it.
Yeah.
Shuts down. We're cutting ribbons, parades. Now we have companies moving here with 4,000 jobs, they tell us, and then they show it with 7,000 people. You look at what Alliance Bernstein did, what's happening with Amazon, with Oracle. I mean, it was supposed to be half the number of jobs, but once someone tastes it, so well, yeah, that's where I have to live. So long-winded answer of we're excited about it. I think people are moving here to tap into what we are and not change who we are. And I think that's really important. And I love the fact that we're pulling people in from the left side of the political spectrum to the right side of the political spectrum. I absolutely am so excited about what's happening between the city and the state now, the kind of reemergence of a really good relationship that both sides are really working at because we're stronger as a state and a city when that happens. And people notice that. And I mean, if you owned a company and you were thinking about a new headquarters, where would you go? I mean, I can name 4 cities, 5 maybe. I mean, there's not a better place to do business. And again, I talk about it all the time, and people think I'm just telling stories. This is the easiest place in America to do business, for at least what we do. And again, I've worked in quite a few, St. Louis, DC, Tampa, Detroit, New York, and all good cities in their own right. But if any one of them said, look, we're going to give you half the franchise and 100 times your salary, would you come here? I'd say, no, like this is the best place to come. My first game here was in 99, and there were 7,000 people in the building. And it was right when we were looking at buying the Lightning with the Pistons. And I thought, man, it's pretty cool. Music is breaking out here or there. Then I came back. We were the worst team in the league in 2003, 2004. Dead last place, 28th in the league, I guess, 28 teams at the time, maybe 30. And we just won in Dallas, and we won on a 21 game. We won 21 out of 23 games, but we're in Nashville for our second game. They were having their best season ever, about to make the playoffs first time. And about 10,000 people in the building. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, we need to do this in Tampa. Like, we had a loud building. It was a really big building, 4,000 seats bigger than this one. And that's when I realized there's something really cool happening right here in Nashville. To become part of that years later, excited about. I'm equally excited about bringing those companies relocating into the fold. There's nothing better to me than when a company relocating from, pick the North City, and they come in wearing their Ranger jerseys or the Bruin jersey, or, we're playing them. And when they leave and say, that was the best time watching my team lose I've ever had in my life. Like,
Yeah.
that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. And kind of going back to talking about the ticket prices and how you always want to make sure it's affordable for a 16-year-old Sean
Mm-hmm.
Henry. I remember kind of going back to what you're saying with 10,000 people being in
Mm-hmm.
there as well. The cell block has always been a thing. The catfish has always been a thing. How did you really? I mean, I know you weren't here when the team first got here, but how do you think those traditions came on so early and they've stood the test of time as well?
Well, I think really early on, the team did a good job in listening to the fans and then getting out of their way. And I think we stubbed our toe a few times. Even when Broadway wasn't Broadway, there was still an energy level that was there. Inside the building, we still didn't tap into that. And it was almost like that energy came off the streets and died when you hit the doors, died on the concourse, and then picked back up around our game and the music. But one of the things that they did that was so bright was basically, hey, they're your chance. We're not going to try to force them. Let us know what they are. We'll amplify them. And then once you do that, it's hard to stop. But Jack Diller, who was the original president, CEO, growing up, I used to follow him because he was president of the Rangers and Knicks in Madison Square Garden. He told me the one thing that he learned early on, he tried to force some things. Like he wanted, I'll probably get the story wrong. You know, the wave? He wanted the wave to go two different ways. The upper bowl go one way, the bottom the other. I don't know if I'm doing that right. And he said, I was adamant about it. Like I was ignoring their chants and the cheers, what they wanted to do. And I brought the fans in for a fan fest and we are going to rehearse it. Nobody likes being told what to do. I don't care who you are and what you are. And I love listening to Jack talk about it. He said, and then they kept doing those chants, you know, you suck and this and that. And that's when I realized maybe I should stop trying to force this and let it just grow. We've tapped into that. And one of my biggest things were, how do we take the energy from Broadway and keep it going through the plaza, at doors, on the concourse? And we mix in some music and ambassadors and giveaways that allow it. But the biggest thing is it's your game. You know, you're like, all we do is open the doors for it and stewards of the brand. But, you know, we meet with our fans all the time. And, you know, my counterparts kind of make fun of me. Yeah, I sit in, you know, section 105. All of our owners sit in the bowl seats. There's not another team. I know there are a handful of owners that pretend they do. You know, one I won't mention because I'm afraid of him. He has so much money, but he has upper bowl seats. And he sits there. He hasn't sat in those upper bowl seats ever. Like never, ever, ever.
He may own the seat.
Right. And a real big lesson I learned when I was about 12 years old, I was doing a Yankee game and my dad's boss got him tickets for all of us. And there was George Steinbrenner seats. I was sitting, oh my gosh. Years later, I got to know George Steinbrenner fairly well when I was in Tampa. I told him the story and he started laughing. Now here I've been in the business forever.
Yeah.
And he said, hey, dummy, they're all my seats. I was like, oh my gosh. So, but again, our owners sit in the seats. And I remember we were playing a team in the playoffs and I went to get on an elevator and the guy put his hand on my chest. I said, I'm sorry, the elevator's occupied. There was one person there who I knew really well. And I said, what are you doing? He goes, oh, he's good. He can come on. I said, did you travel with security? He said, well, yeah, you know, sometimes these fans, who knows what they're going to say? I said, well, let's say they start beating you up. How badly do you think they can do it before someone jumps in? I said, what are you doing so bad?
Right.
You know, that I'm sure there are some fans that want to, you know, beat on me, but I can't imagine walking around with security and then going to some private area to watch the game. I mean, we entertain in our suites and I run in there in intermission and pregame. But when I look out and, you know, Herb Fritz sits directly across from me, Tom's a row or two in front of me over here, the Thompsons a section or two over, Joel Dauberpool over here, Bill Haslam is about 8 rows in front of me. Like, that's a cool thing. You know, when your owners and your executives walk in the same door and pay for the tickets the same way as your fans, you get to see our communication, what we're doing well, and what you're like, ooh, we got to change that. And that's what makes us special. Again, our owners are fans that are smart enough to provide direction and challenges, but they don't try to run the team, which I think is really special. And, you know, Tom did it so well. Herb Fritz became our chairman, and that's about to transfer to Bill Haslam, which if you're excited about the Preds before and the future, you should be really excited because what Herb and Bill did together in this transition, the next 20, 30, 40 years are really exciting. I wish I was 20 years old, not 56.
Well, I can testify for you because the only other interaction I've had with you, it was in front of the barbecue place on the main level. And I remember walking past you, I was like, there's no way that was the CEO. And yes, it truly was you. And so I can testify. You are down there without security.
Well, you were you had a bodyguard. You were Chase McCabe. My gosh, some gentle giant. You know what's really neat though is when you look at my counterparts with the Sounds, with Nashville SC and the Titans, we're all very similar. And we just have a lot of fun. We like each other too. We go to lunch once in a while, maybe a beer or two once in a while as well. And there again, we're all fans of our own team. we're all fans of sports in the city. Yeah, at the same time, it's a job. But I think we have something special going on with who and what we are as our owners and then our executives.
And you just mentioned a team, and we've talked about a few other Nashville teams. With Nashville SC coming on board, how has that kind of changed the landscape of what you do, adding in another team? And there's possibly even another team coming to Nashville soon too.
It was funny. Oh gosh, in maybe the fall of 2016, I got a phone call from a guy that's become a pretty good friend now, who's leading the charge of bringing a soccer team here. And I don't know if you remember, but there were two or three different groups that were going to do it. And I always look at that and I thought, there's no way in the world soccer's coming here if there are three groups. And we got close with one of the groups, and I will never forget. Chris Redditch is his name. He said, "I think we're going to merge with this other group and this group." And Senator Haggard at the time was going to be the owner of the team, and then he ran for Senate. But there was no ego in who was going to own the team. It was about, let's get a team here. And we entertained MLS at a couple of games that year, and then we just lost the Stanley Cup. And I won't lie, when we get knocked out of the playoffs, I need a period of mourning. Like, I know it's awful. My family knows it. We normally just go somewhere. Spur of the moment, just go somewhere where you're not looking at your phone, you're not taking phone calls. Because, again, you fall off a cliff. And that year we were scheduled to go where we always go. And I got a phone call from the mayor, and she said, MLS is coming. You have to stay for lunch. And we just lost, like, I don't know, 2 days before. It's all right, we will. And it was really cool. Steve Underwood was at the Titans at the time. He was supposed to go on vacation at the same time, too. Ironically, like blocks from each other. I didn't even know that. And it was neat to see him postpone his vacation. Obviously, I did, too, to welcome MLS. And, I went to New York a few times to help, push it forward. But when Senator Haggerty stepped out and John Ingram stepped in, how fortunate we'd have John Ingram owning the team, it was unique because every team in town was trying to bring it here. In other cities, you try to kill it. I mean, you just would, because there's competition. There is no competition between teams. Anyone that thinks that is looking for excuses for their own failure. That wasn't always the way here, but I love the fact that I can call up anyone with the other teams and say, hey, let's do this together. And we're doing cross promotions with them. That doesn't happen in other cities. So it really is neat having Nashville here. I think Nashville SC is doing such a good job of bringing people out to games that maybe haven't been to a Preds game before. If you have a great time at Nashville SC, the odds are you're going to come to a Preds game then. That's the way we see it. If you have a brand new sponsor or suite holder that has a great time there, well, they're probably going to look at sports investments differently. So the better we are, the better it is for the Titans, the Sounds, and Nashville SC. The better the Titans are. It all kind of comes together. People ask me early on about the stadium. Oh, you must be against the new football stadium, right? And no. If that's what they think they need to be more successful, how much better are we as a city when we are bringing a Super Bowl here or, whatever large events we're not doing currently, which we don't miss too many events. The one or two you look at are, Final Four and the Super Bowl. If we are back in the running for the Democrat or Republican National Convention, we can host it so much better with a dome stadium too. So we're pretty big, believers in it. My son actually worked on the project too. I mean, so people are like, well, inside, I know you're against it. I was like, well, if I'm against it, then I have a bad kid. And I don't. Like, he's a wonderful, he gave me a granddaughter. So he's great too.
That's the only reason he's a good son.
He's the best right now. Of the four of them, he's the leader. But it's a unique city in that regard. I mean, Ian Air, we were next door neighbors. I didn't know it. He didn't know it. He was out getting his newspaper in his underwear, and I was like, oh my gosh, who's that crazy guy? He tells the story that I was, so I get to do it that way. But that's how we became friends away from the stadiums and away from the teams. And, once you get to know a guy and you become friends, it's really easy to call on them. Burke's daughter and my daughter went to high school together. We see each other at high school basketball games now with our younger kids. It's his son and my daughter, but, normally double headers. We see each other at the dump. We see each other at the grocery store. Again, when you see people away from work and you like them, it's really easy to work together too.
And I think that's what makes Nashville so special, all of the teams working together. You really do see that cross promotion. But lastly, the Preds have always been in the community. We've talked about that. What are some upcoming events that people can see the Preds in the community?
Well, we are self-funding. We raise our own money. We take our fans' passion, our players' passions, our employees' passions. Every employee gives at least 40 hours a year of community service, which generates, 10, 12,000 hours a year. So I always say that some of the best things you can do to help support what we do in the community, come to our fun events. We have Nash Vegas coming up In a few weeks, tickets are on sale right now. All the players are there. You get to hang out with them, play cards with them, play craps with them, roulette with them. Just hang out and see them a little differently, which is always nice. That ends up funding so much of what we do. One of the coolest things we did this past year, unfortunately, was rallying around Covenant School, but all the teams got together for a field day, for them, and we're going to continue that forward. We just met with the First Lady, Maria Lee, last week about doing something collectively with all the teams. We build playgrounds every year. We've done, I don't even know, 12 or 13 of them. We're about to do something really big with MDHA that she's going to support as well. When we get to do things with the other teams, I think it just shows the city how close we all are too. So there's something every month, from our bowling event to fishing tournament to I call it a wine tournament, to our beer festival, to Nash Vegas, probably missed one, our golf tournament, our shooting tournament, I guess. I don't know what the proper term is. But no matter what your passion is, there's a way to connect with our team. And then every game, we have different collections. We feature a charity. There's always a need. And unfortunately, whether it's in our city or somewhere else, it's there. What I like is when something bad happens in the city, people turn to us and say, what are you going to do? And at first it annoyed me. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Then you realize, wait a minute, people see us as a little bit more than just a hockey team or just an arena. When the Christmas morning bombing happened, we became the FBI's and Metro PD's headquarters, for a handful of days. We didn't even think twice about it. Christmas morning, we're all in there together making coffee and lunch for them. When the tornadoes happened in 2020, which we thought was going to be the worst thing to happen that year, again, we opened our doors and we provided outlets, for charging phones, showers, bathrooms, and we started cooking. You were good at bringing people together. So hopefully we get to come together when there's not a disaster. But it's nice to know that our fans are always willing to support what we're doing when there is one.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you taking time to sit down with me. CEO of the Nashville Predators, Sean Henry. Again, thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. And then I have one-off question before you stop recording. Okay.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to put this
That's
somewhere in the
weird,
middle.
man.
No, I'm just going to put it somewhere in the middle because I liked how that ended. So, your employees, I know they have incentives for the amount of community service they do, correct? Can you tell me a little bit about that program?
Yeah, so it's funny. We always say we're a fairly irreverent place to work. It's a great place to work if you're comfortable every day looking at what we do, how we do it, and how we can be better. For some people, that's like, oh my gosh, yesterday was great. It can't be better. How do you live that way? Like, we had a great Lions party last night. It was great. It could have been better if they kicked one of those field goals.
Yeah.
So we really push everyone to think, how can it be different? How can it be bigger? How can it be better? But, we have a company-wide bonus plan that's tied, to personal performance, of course, financial success as an organization. But within that personal performance is, you have to hit your hours, that you donate. We also have educational opportunities through our DEI programs or our guider program. We just want to expose people to, more and more things. And it's not a lot. It's not a big jump. But at first, I think people look at it like, oh my gosh, 5 hours, 10 hours, 40 hours. How am I going to do it? And then they do one of the volunteers, or, they go to a lunch and learn about, something very, very different. And they want to know when's the next one. And that's when you have something special. But we tell people before we onboard them, this is what is expected. This is who we are. This is how we are. We're going to have a lot of fun, but it's also work. It's a combination. And it doesn't matter what you are in an organization. If you're an accountant, you're going to be an accountant. That's great. But we also need you to weigh in on our marketing campaign, what we're doing from an operational standpoint. It's a cool thing. But I remember when we were bidding on the SEC men's tournament. We were bidding on 1 year. Greg Sankey was the associate commissioner at the time. I've known him for a while. Good SUNY guy like me. We're alumni together, which I've never met anyone from a state school from New York before. And I was late for the meeting. Again, I'm never late for anything. And I came in just, sweating like I was in a spelling bee, man. I was just dying. He's like, are you okay? I said, yeah. I said, where were you? What, like, you're sweating through
Are
your
you
suit.
okay?
I said, well, we're just cleaning the bowl. He said, what are you talking about? In between sessions of SEC, you empty out 10,000 people, about to load in 14,000 people, whatever it is. You got to clean, you literally pick up garbage, and our employees doing it. And he laughed. He said, hang on a minute. You're telling me that you we're picking up. I said, yeah, dirty diapers, spit cups. And he's like, that's I don't believe you. I said, that's fine, whatever. I said, tomorrow, come meet me at 3:40 and we'll do it together. He's like, I'm going to meet. I said, all right. Because he didn't think it was true. And it was pretty cool negotiating that one SEC with Greg Sankey, picking up trash, people's old nachos and soda and peanuts between sessions. And I always tell that story because he's looking out over a couple hundred of our full-time employees out converting the building so we can open it up as fast as possible and treat people a certain way. And by the end of that picking of trash, we didn't get one SEC tournament. We got 12.
Yeah.
Since then, we extended that, for 12 more, I think. But that's who our employees are. It's we want them to buy into who we are and what we're doing. And the best thing we could do is have a great, whatever last night show was. People say, what's your favorite concert? I've seen, I don't even know, 10,000 concerts. And it's sincere. It's whoever's playing next. And I mean it because we're there to serve the fans. And, hockey's the core. I mean, it's everything. It's what drives me. It's most of my time. But every event is really important. Every time someone decides to come to our building, it's important. So for our employees, it's sure, donate your 40 hours, but have fun doing it. But by the way, if that's not for you, let's talk and figure out where the best place for you to work is. Because in our building, you're going to serve. You're going to serve the people coming in the front door. You're going to serve the people coming in the back door. You're going to have talent. And then most importantly, you're going to serve